One is COVID and the desire to manage this city well and to, with the employees and the impacts and all the decisions that are being made and those that are impacted in our community and their health. We just ask God for your covering on our community. I ask for your covering on City Council and all of our employees, that you would watch over them and keep them. And Lord, probably the most important thing that we all ask for tonight related to this meeting and fire district is we need your wisdom. We need the wisdom of the Lord to make a right decision. We understand the gravity and the bigness of this decision, that it's historic in our city, and we don't take that lightly. Our desire is that we make decisions that are in the best interest of every single citizen. As we look out for their best interests, Lord, I ask that you would guide our conversations, that you would direct us, and that we would operate and be led by your wisdom tonight. And Lord, I thank you for the team of people that have come together and worked so diligently, our legal teams and the fire department and the district. Lord, I thank you for the collaboration. And Lord, I thank you that everyone desires to do the right thing. So Lord, direct us in that path, and we ask it in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, Nathan, I'll let you start with roll call.
Rodriguez?
Here.
Bruder?
Here.
Bunchy?
Here.
Levi?
Present.
Everfield?
Here.
And Bauer?
Here.
Thank you. As we get started this evening, the very first thing I want to address is, just so that it's resolved for the whole evening, has to do with the fact that we do have a councilwoman that's married to a firefighter, which is a wonderful thing. And so we just want to have clarity in her role in voting on this, and I think our attorney, Todd Lakey, will address that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'll just start with Councilmember Mucci approached me and wanted to make sure that everything was appropriate. So to her credit, she asked me to look into it. In the Ethics in Government Act is contained in Title 74, Chapter 4. And what essentially constitutes a conflict of interest is a pecuniary benefit to either yourself or your family members or a business that you may be involved in. And what we're doing tonight is, as far as fire department employees, revenue neutral or agnostic. It has no specific action that increases compensation or provides any particular benefit financially to any particular employee. This change is subject to the current budget that's been appropriated. It would be subject to the budget that's appropriated for next fiscal year as part of that normal process. And then ultimately, if it's approved and employees are transferred over, then they're subject to the budgetary process of the district. So there is no pecuniary benefit to Councilmember Mucci's family or her.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you addressing that. So this process has been a lengthy process. It's taken a lot of work. It's been a heavy lift. And I just want to start by saying thank you. Thank you to all of you for your diligence, the due diligence that has been put into this. Council, as we go through this tonight, there's a lot to go through, as you know, just a few pages in there. And so what we've done this evening is we've broken it up into our action items, as you noticed in your packet. That the action item, all the information related to the action item is in that bucket. Any adjustments from the first time you got to look at this will be covered this evening. I appreciate Bill Ponike with White Peterson also being here tonight. And so the discussion is going to be led. Kurt Carpenter, I'm going to let you guide it. The only thing I'm going to do is move us from action item to action item when you guys say go. and that we've covered it. And so this is an opportunity to ask questions and to gain the clarity that we all desire. So Kirk, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. You ready to?
I'm
you
ready.
to start?
I think we're ready. It's all
right.
yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I promised my team I wouldn't talk too much. I do talk too much when I get nervous, and today I was nervous, and it was compounded by the day that we experienced at the city. It is a heavy day, both in the emergency service realm as well as just in the COVID realm. We had a fire this morning at the Cottonwood Hotel in Boise, which housed all the COVID positive homeless people that we've been assisting. And so you just seem to, every day seem like it gets a little heavier. And then as I was listening and as we talked this morning, I just was reminded that it's another opportunity for us as a community to inject ourselves into the lives of our community and try and help in any way we can with optimism and the proper outlook. So, Mayor, so I wrote down what I was going to say, because I was given feedback that if I'm random, I get wordy. So I wrote down how I would like to start, and then really this conversation is going to be guided by council, and questions can be answered by myself. We do have the consultant virtually taking COVID precautions. We have representation from the commission with Chief Richard Davies here as well to answer questions, and we're looking forward to good conversation. So, Mayor and Council, I want to thank you for taking the time once again and exchanging your precious time from your families and homes to invest in this fire department. There's a tremendous amount of people tonight that are thinking and praying for us, and I'm thankful for them and this opportunity. In the past days, I've had so many people come up and say, "Good luck to you, good luck to you," and as I would hear it, it reminded me of a statement we use in the fire department, that luck, or we say chance, favors the prepared. In all things we do as a firefighter and in the fire department for this community, we recognize that there are moments in time where we're put in positions when someone's going to depend on us to solve the problem, stop the pain, or save what's being lost. We recognize that as Nampa firefighters, we have a choice. And the only way that we can be ready to serve in those humbling moments is to invest our time and energy. Often, our members invest that time at a level that's detrimental to the other valuable pieces of their lives, just as you. It takes time from their family. It takes time from their self-care. Also, when we get to that moment and it arrives and we're asked to serve, we don't rely on luck, and we know our chances are favored by preparation. So, I would like to relay to this council and mayor, to those listening, and to the community of Nampa, this effort that you have before you that you are going to consider tonight has much invested and in its preparation. There are so many people that I need to thank and that are owed through this process. First off, because it would make me cry if I waited till the end, I have to thank my family and my spouse and my wife, Nicole. Man, the grace that she has given me in the last year is tremendous, and I do owe her greatly. Second, I'm so proud of our department, the command staff that leads us, it includes that for us, Richard Davies, and I have to thank their families because they have spent many a night away. Countless hours of committed work has been invested by them. I am so thankful for amazing partners in our city departments, each one of them, and the division heads, each one of them contributing in some sort of way, whether it was me wasting hours of time interviewing them or just giving me specific feedback. I specifically owe a special thanks to Doug Racine, the cause of a lot of that. I would like to in preparing the research. Quick immersion. Now with how much time they're professional. They came to a conclusion and what's best for the community in their efforts to put it on paper for your guidance. And Mayor and Council, lastly, and the fire commissioners, I appreciate the trust that you place in me, the trust that you give to our department. I'm thankful that you care about this fire department enough that you are willing to traverse through this effort with us each and every step. So thank you. In the council packet provided for you, there's nearly 2 years of work, over 1,000 pages of data, and it is overwhelming. Provided to you in that information, we hoped are the answers to the questions on how to best secure the future of our fire department while best protecting not only the fiscal responsibility we all have to our residents, but also our charge to protect the safety of their lives and property. In just under 3 weeks, our community responded with over 500 surveys with over a 90% positive rating in favor of the decision that you're considering tonight. We know, looking at fiscal projections, whether it's from a consultant or from our own finance team, if we continue as we are as a city, we cannot afford to stabilize our response to our community. The choice of consolidation is a value to every resident of Nampa through its ability to provide the construction and staffing of stations to maintain and improve service. They can do this without negatively affecting the city's budget or other divisions, and our residents would have elected officials solely focused on fire and EMS response to our community. Again, I did promise my team I wouldn't talk much, so really we need to get to the meat of the work, and that truly is having Todd Lakey go over his legal executive summary, which will give you a 30,000-foot view of the documents you have in front of you, of the items you're considering tonight. We also have Bill Punkeny here, who is here to also answer any questions as we go through these documents. And again, I appreciate both of them as being very professional and prepared to help us. So I will go ahead and pass it to Todd, if you're ready, Todd, to go over your executive summary.
You know, Todd, do you mind coming forward? It'll be easier to see you. So nothing like catching you right when you swallowed wrong.
Yeah, let me take a quick sip to make sure that all.
Mayor, if I may, Chief, you enunciate very well, but maybe it's my age thing. I mentioned this at the NDC meeting the other day. If you could take your max down when you come up and speak.
That's true.
I'm working them a little too hard, I think.
Thanks. No, I was going to say the same thing, so thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were going to say so moved.
So, Madam Mayor and council members, again, for the record, I don't know if I need to do this as city attorney or not, but Todd Lakey, city attorney. And I will start, Mayor, by just kind of hitting a few high points. The main item that you have that gets everything rolling is item 1.1. That addresses the agreement and a number of documents and resolutions that really kind of provide the nuts and bolts of the transition. As was mentioned, there's thousands of pages of documents in here. We've gone through and fine-tuned and tweaked, and we still may find a typo, but all of that will be corrected if we do prior to signing. But we've gone over it and over and over it, and appreciate Bill Punkeny. He is here. What I anticipate doing right now is kind of going over the high points and talking about, again, the transition. If we get down to, or when we get down to talking about specific documents, if it's okay, Mayor, if I go over there and sit down and we can go through things, and Bill also has things on his computer. I happen to just do old school tonight and print everything out. But so I will mention, Mayor and council members, there's two steps to this. The main step is this evening, approving the action items. The last action item deals with a transfer of real property that I'll talk about a little bit more. But that does, if you move forward with the annexation, there's a second step regarding the transfer of the real property, which requires a declaration of value and an intent to transfer, and then a notice and a public hearing, which would occur on December 7th. So that would be the second step, kind of a small step in relation to the big step that's before you tonight. I do want to add that myself and Mr. Punkeny are not here with a policy position. We're here to just tell you about the nuts and bolts and how it moves forward. The policy is your charge to determine whether that's appropriate. And also the terms of the agreements, the major terms that we have in there. So I noted in my executive summary, council members, and I'll just remind you again, this anticipates a long-term cooperative relationship. And once we go down this road, it's really hard to back it up. There's not a test drive, so to speak, of this vehicle. So you need to be comfortable and confident in your decision to move forward or not move forward. So I'll start out initially. The agreement itself provides for annexation of all the property within the city limits into the fire district. The annexation is accomplished through the passage of an ordinance. Following the council and district approval, then the annexation documents are presented to the county commissioners and they go to the state tax commission for approval. There's a couple of key dates in this. The first key date is the annexation date, which is January 10th, 2020. And that's the date that anticipates all of these approvals from the council and the county and the tax commission would be accomplished by that January 10th date. That would include transfers of personal property and real property effective on that date. The agreement then contemplates a transition period, and that is the period between that date and essentially the operations transfer date, which is January 1st, 2022. So in that interim, in that in-between time, as I said, we'll accomplish the transfer of the real property. The real property that is transferred are the fire stations that we have, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the transfer of the fire stations, the real property, comes with a right of first refusal. So if the property is transferred by the city to the fire district only has a single purpose. It provides fire services and EMS. But if they were ever to look to sell one of those pieces of property, then they would notify the city would have an opportunity to purchase that property back at the price that is being put forward by the individual or entity that wants to purchase the property. Fire Station 5 is owned by the city, but it's on leased ground at the airport. So the physical structure and facilities would be transferred to the fire district, but the underlying property would remain with the city and the airport and be leased. And then that lease would be transferred, or a new lease, excuse me, I think the old one needs to be redone, would be subject to the same terms and conditions essentially that exist in that lease and then subject to FAA approval. The transfer of real property does not include the fire department administrative offices or the property containing the fire training center. Those facilities will be subject to license agreements for the fire district to use those facilities in this interim until essentially they have either an opportunity to look for a new facility or no longer need them. Those license agreements for the administrative offices and the fire training center have a longer period of time. The fire districts have been using them for some time, and so it has longer terms in there. The administrative offices, the initial term is 3 years with a 12-month notice of termination by the city. So if the city decides we need to have those offices, we give them 12 months notice and they have to be out. If the fire district finds another appropriate office, they can give us 28 days notice and then they're out and we can do what we would like to do with that property. The training center is a little bit longer term. We've worked with the engineering department and the wastewater, knowing where that's located. They can peacefully coexist for a long period of time. So that's essentially a 10-year notice of termination. But the fire district, I think, also recognizes long-term, they'd like to have their own facility and ground. But that's the provisions for the training center. And then the code enforcement
offices which the city uses in Station 4 would then be subject to a license to the city from the fire district for use of those facilities, continued use of those facilities by the city. And that has a 2-year notice of termination that the district would give to the city if they needed that space.
Could I pause and just make a comment on that?
Sure.
Just so city council knows, the intent is to move code enforcement over. We think that there is space, and the intent has been that they're moved over to the utility billing office so that all payments within the city are taken at one location, which is right here, and it brings them into proximity. And so as we did the most recent moves, that is the intent of where we're going with that.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and council members, so you have the transfer of the real property that would occur by that January 10 date. Then you have transfer of personal property that would also occur. And so personal property is everything from frying pans, as I said in here, to fire hydrants and to fire engines, not fire hydrants, fire engines. Everything that's in those offices that is being used or needs to be used by fire staff would be transferred to the district. The city would also transfer its agreements, licenses, leases to these physical facilities and equipment, whether they're vehicles or some of the monitors and pieces of equipment that are leased. The city would continue to make those lease assignments, payments during that period until everything is transferred over to the district. So the transfers operations date, I mentioned that previously. That's when on January 1st, 2022, the fire staff would transfer from the city and become district employees. No longer city employees. The city would no longer be responsible for wages, benefits, all of those things would be transferred as part of that transfer of personnel. During that continued operations term between January 10 and January 1, that's when the city will continue to provide fire services, continue to operate things. The district would own those facilities. We'd have the licenses to operate and use those facilities. But on January 1, 2022, they take over everything, and the city no longer has responsibility for that. There's a period of time that is part of a subsequent fiscal year. So those last 3 months of next year, this agreement does not commit the city to any specific appropriation. That would be contrary to the Constitution, but it says that the city and all of this will use its best efforts to work with the fire district to develop a budget, but all of that is subject to your budget approval in the subsequent fiscal year. And then when you get through those 3 months, after you've appropriated the funds and operated the fire district, at the end of the year, then again, everything gets transferred that's not transferred at this point, personnel, all of that to the district, and the remaining funds that are budgeted for that year then go to the district. After that, then the city would have no further responsibility to fund or operate fire other than impact fees. And this agreement also addresses the impact fees. That impact fees are important. They're needed for construction of new facilities, to maintain your level of service, all those things that you have them in place for now. It proposes a change to that impact fee agreement that would allow those impact fees to be transferred to the district. There's not, again, a commitment on that legislative action specifically in the agreement, but to operate and to move forward in good faith. And it's certainly hoped and planned for by the district that those impact fees would continue to flow to them to help them provide the fire services that we would all like to see. It also transfers the funds in the major acquisitions plan, or the MAP fund, that have been accumulating for, I believe, physical facilities. Those funds would also go to the district again, and then that MAP agreement would be replaced by this agreement. The district will adopt all of the city fire department policies and the personnel manual as part of this process. And then they have the ability, once they take everything over, it's their personnel manual, they can make changes and function just like a district with their own staff. The agreement also, it's a joint powers agreement. It establishes a joint advisory committee that has 6 members. And this committee is comprised of members on behalf of the city, members on behalf of the district, and then 2 others, specifically 2 members appointed by the mayor, 2 appointed by the district board, then the fire chief and the city finance director. And this committee is essentially a tool for communication. If there's something that needs to be coordinated, that's what this committee is for. It doesn't have any binding authority on either entity, but it can make recommendations on policies or implementation or dispute resolution, but it doesn't have any binding authority on either. Let's see, I think I talked about impact fees already. Dispute resolution. So this agreement provides for a dispute resolution process. If the city and the district disagree in the future, it provides a methodology to handle that. First is mediation, non-binding mediation. If you're not agreeing, you have a professional mediator that can help resolve those disputes. But again, it's non-binding. If that doesn't resolve the dispute, then either side has the ability to go to court and get a declaratory action or pursue any other remedy at law. It doesn't have a standard, you're in default and we terminate in 30 days provision because of the ongoing relationship. So it's a dispute resolution process, informally or formally. The parties can mutually agree to terminate the agreement. It also provides for what's called a notice of full performance. So if one side or the other feels like we've done everything we need to do under this agreement, it can notify the other party that that's the case. And if there's no objection from the other party within 60 days, then the agreement becomes of no further effect. I did include in here, as I mentioned it a couple times, the agreement itself cannot mandate the passage of future ordinances or future appropriations, and that's generally addressed in here. So there's still some discretionary acts that need to occur after item 1.1-1. In regard to the real property transfer, and this is the last high-level thing I'll cover, when the city transfers real property, you have the ability to transfer real property to another government entity without charge. But when you do that, you need to first declare a value, and then you need to declare your intent to convey real property. And that's done on the record, and then that is published and noticed in the paper, 14-day notice, and then you have a public hearing just in relation to the real property transfer. And you'll note in the documents in here, there's a value that I plugged in. I initially was talking with Mr. Gigray and got some information from the finance department and plugged in some accounting numbers, GASB 34 figures. I'm not an accountant, but those things, as I looked at them, included depreciation. And so Station 1's older and it's almost fully depreciated. And under that system, it wouldn't have any value. So I then looked at ICRIM and what do we insure the buildings for? And those are the numbers that I ultimately plugged in. It's a replacement value. I would say that's conservative and probably higher than they're worth because these buildings probably are not easily transitioned to some other use. But that's, again, a conservative approach just so we're not trying to undervalue things. Again, the value is just simply a declaration. The proposal is to transfer the real property without any cost over to the district with that right of first refusal. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions or tag team with Bill, depending on what the questions are, or I don't know if there's any other presenters tonight. Jude?
Okay, so let's begin with any questions that council might have following your legal summary. And then we may need to just step into action item 1.1 and talk about all that's involved in this one piece.
Is it okay if I go sit down now?
Yes,
Mayor?
it is.
Okay.
And thank you for coming forward. It's just helpful to see you. So are there any initial questions from council before we get started? Thank you.
I have several questions, but I'm waiting for the president here to give him the floor if you want.
Well, I have obviously several questions too. We've had this dialogue for the whole time I've been on council. I think 6 years at least that we've been involved in this. And I keep coming back to the same point that I asked for clarification on, and I still haven't heard it yet. What is the benefit to the citizens of Nampa? when Chief, when you talk about community, are you talking about the citizens of Nampa or the outlying area of the citizens, of the community as well, beyond the city limits? Because obviously we were elected to represent the citizens of Nampa proper. The greater good would be served, obviously, by focusing on the needs of the citizens of Nampa. And that's always been our goal, to give you guys what you need to the best of our ability to provide it, and to look at ways like the quick response vehicles of how we can provide the ability for you to get to citizens quicker, so that that can be accomplished. And then the greater good is beyond that, as calls are taking you outside of the city limits. So I still have not heard, and I had hoped that we would be presented with an executive summary that says these are the benefits to the citizens of Nampa. I haven't seen that yet. I've seen some things and I've had to draw some conclusions if that's truly, what they truly are. But again, I hear Ann Westcott speak about the larger area. And again, our focus should be the smaller area, which is the city limits.
So Mayor and Councilman Haverfield, let's talk about the area within the city limits.
Mhm.
The value of the consideration you're taking tonight is, should an annexation occur, stations and staffing can happen at an extreme accelerated rate rather than stay with the city. We're at a point of growth where we can put more vehicles out of the stations that we currently own. They can't get to the areas that need response quick enough. So that would be my biggest answer, is the value to the people that elected you and you serve, is that they are provided with a protection that can happen at an accelerated rate by great
Okay.
timeframes.
Let me ask you the obvious question then. The city limits don't grow. They stay as they currently are. That's something that we can choose to do or not do as a council, is to increase that boundary.
Through annexation, is that
Right.
council?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we focus on infill and just outlying right near proximity, that we're really not growing the district that currently has an insurance rating of 2. The benefits to the current citizens that live within the city would not change. It would still be an insurance rating of 2. The response time would be the same. And then if we focused on the hotspot, like Fire Station number 6 would provide us, brick and mortar in that location with vehicles, again, to reduce the response time, we can satisfy the needs of the citizens by focusing on that. That's something we can control. If we give up that control, then there's going to be other people making the decision for the citizens of Nampa and the rural area. And depending on who those individuals are, if they live outside the city limits or within the city limits, you kind of get more of a gray type of an approach. And the focus is less of the things that we've focused on, which, again, let me just finish. I can see when you're saying that you can do things quicker, it's because of property taxes and impact fee dollars, right?
And sales tax revenue, yes.
Right. So at this point, tell me what the benefit would be to the citizens of Nampa with the taxes. Are they going to see a reduced tax base than what they're currently paying, or will it be the same that they're currently paying, possibly increased because you're able to increase the
It would
whatever
be,
tax they're basing?
Mayor and Councilman Haverfield, it would be an increased tax base for sure. It's a larger population that is being taxed for the service of the fire department. And at the time of annexation, it is neutral. They are able to go over at the price that they are being charged today by the city for the fire service they're being given. That would be at the time of annexation. So when we look at the district as a whole, of course, anytime we would add stations or personnel, taxes would increase at the commission's decision, just as council does every year. They would decide what the next budget year would be needing, and they would do the same as you do in increasing the taxes. I guess in response to the growth of the city, I would suggest that just in the history of the past years, council has chosen to grow the boundaries of the city immensely with the amount of housing and industry that we've decided to annex. There's nothing saying that we aren't going to continue to grow, and it's only an assumption by myself, but I would assume that there'll be a day where there's very little of actual district people left that aren't living within or right on the city limits. Our stations and the service that we plan are based solely on our calls and the time it takes for us to get there.
Right.
And we can show you by that by that data, by the percentage of the people that live within that city limits, our stations are planned for within city limits through the next 4. And by the time we get to 5 Midway Park, I'm sure we'll be annexed in, and that's near where Station 10 would be. So those are all things that are thought of. As a whole, you are right. It would be not under the control of the city council. It would be under the commission, who is solely focused on the fire response to the community.
Right, and then.
I'd like to follow up to your comment. I just want to make sure, my understanding is that initially there could be a very minimal savings, maybe $10 a year to the city residents, that actually those outside the city limits would have a slight increase, up to $26 a year, but those numbers, I don't want to be held, they're not exact. Any savings that would be achieved by the city would probably go back to net neutral right away. But I think what's important is the intent is not that there's an initial increase, right? That it's net neutral. The district residents will pay a little bit more. The goal, though, the intent of this is, for example, Fire Station 6, that encompasses city limits. A number of people we know live in 6. And so for 13 years, we have not been able as a city to provide the safety to our own residents, to our citizens. We have not provided them with the the response times that they really deserve. And so I think that the thought here, and it sounds like I'm advocating, but as I've listened, the thought here is that one, that you absolutely do not diminish what we're doing for our residents. I mean, because there's no intent to do that. The intent is to actually ensure that they have the services they need.
And you understand where I'm coming from, the standpoint I'm coming from as a city council member, not as a rural council member.
But as city council, as mayor for the citizens of the city of Nampa, our challenge is that we're not providing the response times to our own citizens.
So there are different paradigms that you could look at this through, and there has been discussion in the past that has always seemed to die for lack of effort, is if a fire station is really needed. As an example, I've been involved with 2 elementary schools in the city of Nampa that have been funded with bonds. You raise a bond because there's a need. Why haven't we not done the same thing with the fire station? Have a bond for a fire station, establish the amount, the equipment that needs to be there, and we're working together for the effort of the best interest of the citizens of Nampa, knowing that the greater good would serve the outlying community. I'm all for that. I think that that's been a proper course in the past, but it just hasn't been considered as of late in comparison to looking at this combination of growing our district. And my concern was, which you've alluded to, is we currently have an ISRB rating of 2, potentially going to a 3 right away, and I'm not sure why, but that's okay.
I can, Councilman Haverfield, I can answer. Upon your last request, we did recontact us, ISRB. We had just received our last rating, and I guess to give you some clarity in that rating, we were rated based on 2018 statistics, and they basically gave us a waiver with your guys' commitment to Ladder 5 and the extra personnel. They gave us a waiver, and it actually extended the waiver into just this year, giving us our rating. We did get a grade that put us in the ISRB 2 level. We were just a 1/10 of a point over the rating of 80. And we were told when we called them again that no matter what we decide tonight, whether we're city or whether you decide to annex into the district, our next evaluation, we will be a 3 due to the lack of our ability to keep infrastructure, not just fire, but infrastructure in line with growth, that we are expanding and growing so fast that we're not going to be able to just come up a couple points.
So can I ask you, how do they determine what that rating is? Is it based upon the whole geographic area that you're serving?
I would actually have to ask ISRB because they say it's proprietary. But it's multiple elements. It's not just the fire department, it's water department, it's streets, it's
Right.
all of those
So
things.
my question then would be is if you enlarge the geographic area, would that not also then lessen or increase our rating to beyond what we currently have it at as a 2 or a 3? Would it become a 5 or a 7?
Through the data they gave us, either way we decide a 3 is where we would be rating. And that was from our ISRB's contact that we made, the Idaho ISRB.
So if we grow geographically all the way to Meridian, all the way to Caldwell, it's not going to change.
Well, I can't answer that for you, Councilman Hammerfield. I just say that given today's 2020's numbers and the data that we were able to provide them upon our request for further information, they said based on 2020 information, we would have been rated a 3, whether we were a district or a city.
Okay, and that's the pocketbooks too that we're talking about, because that changes what we pay as far as for our insurances. So again, I'm just looking for, make it easy for me.
Mhm.
These are the 5 items that the citizens of Nampa are going to benefit by. I know it's going to benefit the rural area, but what's it going to do for the citizens of Nampa? If we focus on fire station number 6 as a council and we say, we're going to take that on, we're going to get it done. Okay, and we're going to do everything that we can get behind it, whether it's a bond, whether it's some other means. Then we're going to get it outfitted with the personnel you need and the equipment. If that was an effort that this council was to go after, it could be accomplished. We've accomplished things in the past. So again, you haven't really given me that list of easy things, and I'm wondering, have we really vetted this properly for the citizens, that they've had enough input so that they can help us make this decision? Are we out on a branch by ourselves making this decision and wondering if it's the right one or not? Because again, we've talked about how important this is and how we need to have full buy-in on it. It can't just be our decision. Otherwise, we're going to be tarred and feathered and run out of town if it doesn't work. So
Kirk,
Yeah.
I'd like to, I was just thinking before we started into this discussion, I think we should give an update on the survey
Mhm.
and how many survey responses we had, the most current. I don't know if you have like yesterday's numbers
Chief
versus.
Munchie did a total for me today. We were just over
Okay.
500 with the handwritten ones that we picked up from our last subdivision.
Okay.
We're over 90% positive to the decision or that you're considering tonight. 6% was undecided and needed a little bit more information, and there was 4% who were against. Some of the against had statements that didn't necessarily parallel with what or connect to what you were considering tonight. It was firefighters don't work enough already, they don't need anything more kind of statements, which that was that person's belief. We did have numerous people within the survey ask for more information, and my staff personally reached out to every single one of them to answer questions and provide data. So I do believe the survey is a reflection within a 3-week time period of 500 people. We felt that was a pretty good collection of data for the short period of time that we did get out there.
Thank you.
With just the avenues that were provided that didn't cost money.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to also address something. Councilman Haverfield, you mentioned the bond. So if you could bond for a building, that's a capital expense, which could be funded through possibly repayment through impact fees, whatever. The issue is that we can't afford the staff, and that comes out of general fund operational costs. And so it's the staffing to man the station. And so that's what's held us, not only the construction of the building, but also the ability to staff it. So right now, to staff a building is going to be somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million. A 3% increase, I mean, right now, when we're not taking increases and you use new construction, that would mean we would not have any additional money to do other increases within the city.
Mayor,
Just the cost.
may I
So
make a comment?
I would love that, Doug. Thank
Okay.
you.
as a finance contributor, and Chief Carpenter can tell you this, I'm pretty neutral, and I've told him several times, beware of what you ask for. I can present information you might not like, and I won't I choose to present the information directly and fairly. So the cost for adding 12 new staff for a new station, you can go down to 9, maybe a different, but 12 new staff, including benefits and the equipment to bring them out, is $1.5 million, because the $1 million is just the labor. Then you've got the benefits that go with them, the payroll taxes, and then there's about $10,000 per staff member, I think, in original equipment. And my point about this is whether we went district or city, you'd still have that cost, but with going with the district, you're spreading that $1.5 million over a much broader base. So you're actually providing a little bit of a lower cost per transaction, so to speak, to the citizens of Nampa, because you're charging that 1.5 to the entire district and not just to the city of Nampa.
And the other thing that I think we might need to touch on right now is state shared revenue. Could you address
Right.
that? Because that actually does make a difference when
Yeah.
you're looking at, so,
So when we look at the total general government funding from property taxes, you all know that we have several primary uses for those funds. So the two general gov primary uses, which are about, well, fire and police, use up about 90 to 95%, no, pardon me, the property taxes only cover about 90 to 95% of the total cost of fire and police. So we're having to borrow from shared revenues, the state sales tax revenues, every year to feed that beast as it grows. And every year we're putting a little more pressure on the shared revenues we get from the state. Now, we've been okay in the past because the shared revenues have been growing. But as I've demonstrated to most of you in meetings, our revenue streams are growing more slowly than our expense streams are growing. Part of the reason for that is, at least on property taxes, is you as the council or as the state legislature have chosen to be very conservative, and I completely support that. We're trying to find ways to not become our big sister and spend rapidly on various items that may be of dubious benefits. So that leads to us finding ways to do more with less. And as a budget person, if you give me direction, this is what I want you to do, I will find a way to do that from a budgetary standpoint. The reality will be that if our revenues continue to grow at a slower rate, which they're likely to do based on whatever the state does, they will limit our revenue streams in some fashion. But our costs are not limited. They will continue to grow. You've got, another challenge is, the reason we're using more of the shared revenues is because we also have the police, which are not bound by that, the same constraints as the fire. The fire may be bound to a geographic constraint, but the police are bound probably more to a population constraint. And so as the population grows, even if the boundaries don't grow, the police costs continue to go up. So how do we feed, as a city, the financial needs to provide for the public safety if I've got the police, which say they're already behind on the staffing, and the fire, which is saying they're behind on 2 stations? The combination of those two could really put us in a very untenable position of making some very difficult choices in the very near future as to what funds we need to speak. We've talked about $1.5 million as for funding 12 staff. That is, our last year's new construction revenues were $1.7 million. That would take virtually all of the new construction revenues. And the 3%, if we would have used it, would have been $1.2 to $1.4 million. So the 1.5 for 1 year would have been all of that increase. But that $1.5 million is every year, it's annual. So the 1.5 then becomes compounded with the additional labor costs. And I could see a way for struggling through to find cuts to do fire. What I can't see a way is struggling to find how to do both fire and police at the same time without really stripping
all of our shared revenues and cutting other services just to provide the core essentials. That would create some very interesting challenges. I think last year I estimated we used around $1.5 million of shared revenue to fund the fire. It's an estimate because we don't build that budget, so I kind of have to look back and see what we would have likely used. And as the needs for service grow, that becomes greater, and then we have less in the pot for general services. So it becomes a question to you, Councilor Haverfield, what's the benefit to the citizens? I would kind of throw it back and say, well, how do you define benefit? If you're talking just fire, you get one answer, but if you talk fire, police, and the rest of general gov, you may get a different answer.
But you see, my dilemma is that if we give up control over the fire and we're focused on other things, sure, we're going to cut off our arm to say we don't need that because we can't afford it, but we're going to focus on the things other than that, then we really are taken out of the ability to manage it, which was what we've had for years. So it's not an easy decision for me to make. And I've followed generations of other city council members, and there'll be others that'll follow me. So I think for this period of time that I'm here, I just want to make sure that I'm making the right decision. And right now, I'm just not going to knee-jerk react to something that might seem right, because I have other questions that come up. I won't bother you with them now, but I just want to make sure we're doing right by the citizens of Nampa. That's who elected us to be here, and the greater good is served by virtue of our focus there. And if there's another way to approach it, make sure that we've covered that base, and found either that it wasn't the right way to go, or maybe it's something to be considered. So
Just
I'll
a
get it.
financial follow point, and then I'll step back, because this is your show. This is not the finance show. The other aspect of this is that you could consider it the other way, where by allowing fire to take their leadership and go as a district, you then have more freedom to focus internally on other critical issues, including public safety with police and other areas. So you can look at one of two ways. Yes, I'm losing control of the fire department, but the other side of the coin is I'm also gaining more control of everything I've got left, so I can really make effective decisions on that aspect. It's, yeah.
Mayor Kling.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Councilman Haverfield, I understand this is a hard decision. I actually told my husband to have a stomach ache. But
I'm sorry.
I'm not sick. I've been part of the firefighter family for decades. And this is not an easy situation on one hand, but it's actually very easy for me when I think about control versus obligation. I live where Station 6 should be. And so when I was reading through, well done, you guys, on tons of information, trying to think of it from not only this chair, but as a taxpayer and as a mother, as a daughter. I think here are my five. You wanted 5 reasons. We have an obligation to protect life. We have an obligation to protect property. We have an obligation to be able to invest in critical infrastructure and needs of the larger city. We have to be positioned for growth. We continue to annex in new properties. I think at our last council meeting, we annexed in hundreds more that are, again, on the outskirts. They'll impact our fire safety, and so I saw that in the packet and brought it forward again. We also have an increased obligation to protect the safety of our employees. When they respond later and later and later, they're at risk. Every time they enter a building that is fully involved because they couldn't get there at the right amount of time, we are putting them at risk. And so the liability, I think, to the city increases and increases. And I think we've seen time and time again in all the documents given to us that the vast majority who benefit from this districting live in the city limits, correct? Vast majority. Most of the commissioners would live in the city limits, correct?
Councilwoman Mache, we can't guarantee that. We would just look at the statistical data that over 83% of the population of the fire district would live within the current city limits.
Correct. So odds ratio, most benefit. So I do think that we have way more than 5. We have a police department who has critical needs as well. We have, every meeting we hear about streets needs this, we have deferred maintenance. If the information that, thank you, Doug, for providing to Councilman Bruner and I from the meeting we had, we could project that the Station 6 could be built in 2024. And it was 13 years from this year that we built our last one. So if we're on a trajectory of being able to build one every 17 years, we already need 6, 7, and 8. We are putting way too many people at risk, and I think we have an obligation to do what's right versus a worry about controlling. That's my opinion.
I'll stop talking. Again, it's taxation, so dollars are going to come from somewhere.
Correct.
And if you're talking about multiple stations and staffing for multiple stations, the dollars are going to have to come from somewhere. So if we're saying it's not going to affect the citizens of Nampa, it's going to affect the citizens of Nampa, and they just won't have the control that they've had in the past. So that's what I want to have clearly defined so that it's out there, and we're eyes wide open. So I'm not Debbie Downer. That's not what I'm trying to be here. I'm just wanting to be realistic, and maybe I'm the counterpoint to the point you're trying to make, but let's consider all things before we just make a decision. So that's all I'm asking for, Mayor.
So I'd like to give the opportunities to some other council men to speak. And so I see I've got 2 ready. I'm not sure who to go with first.
So he's got me on age.
Thank you, I do. I have
So I'll tell
a
you
lot
what,
of you
let's-
on age.
Councilman Rodriguez, then Bruner, then Bauer. We'll
Thank
just
you.
go down the line here and then we'll come back around.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been receiving a whole bunch of information from everybody about taxes. That the district is going to raise our taxes. And how much it's going to be because of everything else that comes at us, the county and the state. And it's going to cost this much because the fire department needs all, and it's mind boggling. Then I get it from Doug about what we can't do, what we can do, and what we're able to accomplish, what we're not able to accomplish. When we took office, or when I took office, we were down 45 police officers, and over the last 3 years, we've hired 19, and it's gone so much better, even though they have some innovative concepts of patrol. But what did we do this year? Nothing. Didn't get anything. And why? Because we're so worried about COVID and our budget and taking care of our people and then taking care of our community as needs. And I think that's what scares everybody is, what am I as a citizen, not only as a councilman, going to propose and allow that are conditioned to our officers and to our firemen and to a community that's going to say, we have to raise our taxes. That's the bottom line. Next year, I don't know what's going to happen with our budget, but in order to continue what we said we were going to do for our public safety and our prevention of our families, or not prevention of families, but their harm and danger, that we would take care of them. It's going to cost. We don't get anything for free anymore. That just doesn't happen. So is it part of the city council to say, okay, fire, next year you're going to get 12 officers. I don't know how we're going to do it. I'm just saying that. And then Doug says, oh, no, you're not. We can't do it. Okay, then we'll raise 2%. Well, what happens to the fire? What happens to roads? What happens to services? And it's just unbearable that we have to raise the taxes. Well, better yet, let's get the district to do it. It equals out a little bit more, even though we've heard up to 18% that we're going to get hit with taxes next year as a resident because of Canyon County and us and everybody else has got their pocket and their hand in our pockets. Well, what do we do then? It's going to cost sooner or later, and I don't know why we worry so much about our safety. I was thinking this other day is I said, I don't hesitate raising water. I don't hesitate raising sewer. Why am I hesitating allowing our community to be safe by this district? It's not going to be an enormous amount of taxes, but safety means a lot to me. So am I going to be too concerned about that? And I was thinking the other day, I woke up and I went, this is like a V8 moment. Why am I worried about this? We're saving people. we're giving them property, we're giving them the ability to survive if something tragic happens. So, but I'm worried about the taxes, but I'm also worried about our community. So if you give me a good reason as to why we should do the district, why we should, or we, the council should say, we'll take care of you. And Doug says, no, you won't. Where does that leave us? Oh my gosh, I even hate to think about it. We can't get more state revenue. That's a given. The legislators are doing their own thing over there, trying to figure out how they can keep the state of Idaho running. So I call it, it's a difficult situation that we're in when it comes to fiscally conservative management, I call that. But when it comes to common sense down to the bare brass, I don't see a problem with this. I'm going to accept what I get from the fire or from the city council or the district, because it's something that I am truly passionate over. So if you can give me the numbers, the true numbers that the district will give us, it'll make me feel better. There. Now, can you do that?
So the question is, I'm sitting here listening, Victor, and thank you for what you shared. So when you say, can you give us the true numbers? So help me understand. So you're looking at financial numbers. I want to make sure that we can answer that. And so Doug probably can.
Okay, so let me word it.
Okay.
If the city council in the 2021-2022 budget was to budget for the Fire Station 6 and 12 firemen, how much of an increase would that behold us to?
If you're talking about 2022, we can't do it. We don't have enough money to do it. Wouldn't even have enough money to pay the operational costs for the 12 new staff, and not nearly enough to construct the building. The earliest we could do it as a city would be 2024. Now, there was a discussion that has gone around with an email I had with several individuals today about leveraging the foregone. That is an option. When the when the general obligation bond is paid in late 2024, in the next year, in 2025, I can start to use that foregone money. Now, I can use that foregone money up to the amount of the general obligation bond payment without increasing any taxes to the citizens. So that's $2.9 million. So in 2025, I could budget an additional $2.9 million of expense to the fire department without causing any negative impact to the citizens. But the remaining 1.6 million, I couldn't budget until 2026. So I'd have to spread it over 2 years. So since we're already at a point where the city could not fund this unless we were to go a bond route or something like that, I could not fund it internally with impact fees and our current fees until 2024. And then I would still have to find some very creative ways to come up with the additional $1.5 million. In that year, it would take quite a chunk of change out of our discretionary spending.
Okay, thank you. Now follow up with that. If we decide to go to the district, then what would be our obligation as a taxpayer for the first 5 years? I guess maybe per year, if you could answer that.
So Mayor and Councilman Rodriguez, I would have to refer to the study that was done by Galena in showing that in 2020, it's in 24 is what it is in their scenario. We would be opening Station 6, and then 3 years later, we would be opening Station 7. I do believe they projected a 3% increase on all 5 of those years, 6 of those years to open those 2 stations, and then that's when you see the varying to they would go down to a 2%. So I would suggest the years prior to a station opening, you would expect the commission to look at their budget and take the taxes that would be needed to open. I guess the other thought to that council would need to consider is that's 3% based on the fire department's budget versus the city's budget. So that's the control there for for how high that can go. So council's not wrong by saying that the citizens of Nampa would see tax increase. The whole fire district would see tax increase with each growth moment of stations and personnel. Well, personnel, because stations would be built out of impact fees. So you're not wrong. It's just focused to fire rather than what you're dealing with now is you're having to figure out how to focus on fire as well as focus on all other divisions. So I guess, Councilman Rodriguez, I can't answer your question other than provide you with the data that Galena had projected.
Well, and I also think Galena also said that due to the increase of taxpayers, that it actually, maybe I was wrong here, that it would not actually be a 3% per household or business. It would be, not business, but it would be because of the state tax commission that would have 1% that would be removing from there. So maybe you're looking at 2% increase. Is that, am I correct, or am I close there?
Mayor and Councilman Rodriguez, I would probably refer to Ozzy. I think he is on virtually to answer that question because I'm definitely not the CPA whiz that he is to do this.
I'm on. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay. So I think I'm trying to understand the question, and I was actually trying to pull up my model as we speak because I didn't think we were getting into this quickly. But I did build in generally a 3% property tax increase to the model for the annexation. So the district would generally do the 3%, and then typically I gave roughly a 1% for growth on that for just normal new development. So that's if the property taxes for the district themselves, and I'm trying to find my model, I'm going from memory. I think it's well, here I can do a quick math calculation without having to have the model up. So it's.
So Ozzy, while you do the math calculation, one thing that we haven't talked about is the state shared revenues that are different. And so with the fire district, we're accessing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that my understanding is around $500,000 a year additional revenue that we as a city do not get to access.
And we could not access.
Right, could not access, and which makes a difference. That is kind of a game changer when it comes to the district because we're accessing funds that we in no other way could access. And so that's when we talk about the difference, that's a big difference that we get
Mayor,
to add.
I would like to interject that at the same time, that's also not having to take revenue that the city currently uses to supplement the fire department as well. We wouldn't be taking revenue with this, just the tax base. So on top of the access to new state sales tax revenue as a taxing district, we also are leaving any of the revenue that was supplementing the fire department's budget.
Mm-hmm.
I just did a real quick back of the envelope calculation on a $250,000 home as an average. So their property taxes if the city were to allow the district to annex would be roughly $285, and 3% of that would be $8. So their property taxes would go up $8 on a standard home at $250,000. That's what would be the impact in the next fiscal year.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered your question. So it would be $8 per household, roughly, annually.
Thank you, Ozzy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor and Council, Richard Davies, Executive Director for the Fire District, formerly Deputy Chief at the Fire Department. Ozzy, when you talk about a 3% property tax increase, I think we need to be clear that what the district and the city likewise is able to do is not increase property taxes by 3%, but increase their budget by 3%. That does not necessarily equate to a 3% property tax increase.
Right. No, that's true.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Okay, so you can't just say, well, if they take 3% on their budget each year, it's going to equate to 3% increase in your property taxes on your $250,000 house. That has to do with the value of the house and the levy.
Oh, absolutely. That's what makes it so complicated.
And the fire
the way the
district,
levy works and the budget work and how they interchange, if the property values went up 3% and property taxes went up 3%, then it's a different formula and the levy rate goes down by 3%. It's the way those two pieces fit together is very confusing at many times, but you're right. I was just assuming the budget went up 3% and if everything stayed flat, it would be an $8 increase to the home.
Very good. Thank you.
and while I'm here, Madam Mayor and Council, if I can speak to the shared revenue property or sales tax revenue. The state has different buckets for sales tax, and the special purpose districts like fire districts and ambulance districts and highway districts, they're kind of at the bottom of the food chain, so to speak, as far as what's left over when they're distributing sales tax revenue to governmental entities. The state takes their share right off the top. Then there's a bucket that the counties get, and there's buckets for the cities to get. The sales tax revenue for special districts is what's left over, and it's proportioned on a basis of the district's property tax budget. It has nothing to do with population, it has to do with their budget. So by the district increasing or annexing the city, their budget would increase, their property tax budget would increase, which would result in a higher amount of sales tax revenue from the state. Not at the expense of the city or the counties or the state, because this all we're talking about is what's left over. Right now, as I looked at the last 2 quarters of sales tax revenue distribution from the state, the district received about $50,000 in this last quarter. Prior to that, it was like $40,000, and that's based on a $2.8 million property tax budget. So it would change significantly, bringing in additional revenue from sales tax from the state, but not at the expense of the city, at the expense of other special purpose districts, because our district would then have a higher percentage or portion of that overall budget or available funds. So.
Thank you for explaining that. Thank you.
Richard, can I ask you another question?
Yes.
So can you briefly describe like what, if say there's a turn in the economy, like say we have like a 2008 situation, in the next little bit, kind of how does that change, forecast the district?
Well, the district, Councilman Bauer, Madam Mayor, in response to that question, we have to anticipate those, as the city does, has to anticipate downturns in the economy, and how do you get through those downturns? It's with your reserves, what you have in fund balance and reserve to help carry you through that. The district has been maintaining a fund balance. They've been anticipating their participation in a future stations, and proportional shared costs with the city in funding the fire department. So they have a fund balance that would help them through such downturns. It would affect, it may, even if we were with the city or the district, it may require that the fire department has to cut their budget, tighten their belts. No different. And they realize that, they understand that, but they're prepared, knowing that, they're prepared to deal with that eventually, when that happens.
Mayor, could I add a little specific commentary on that? So, Councilman Bauer, we specifically, in 2008, our shared revenues decreased about 20%. So shared revenues right now are around $8 million. So you can do the math pretty quickly, how much we could lose if we hit 2008. That would show up rapidly. That's sales tax right now. The property taxes would take a year to 2 before that impact in a decreased valuation before that cycled through into the city. So the most immediate impact to them would be muted by the fact that only $500,000 a year is coming from the additional sales tax revenues. That would decrease immediately. The more concerning long-term impact is what might property valuations do but that would take a year or two before that even showed up in the assessments.
Councilman Rodriguez, do you have any further questions?
I'm done, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Brunner.
Yeah, and he actually may not be older than me, so.
I'll be 70 next
So
year.
I'm going to jump around a little bit. So I'll Chief, I'll try to kind of, and some clarification from you, and then Doug, I can't compliment him enough, but I probably have a couple more questions for Doug. Let me go to the, what Councilman Haverfield was speaking to, and that's the 2 rating. You had an asterisk down on number 1 that said there's no difference in insurance rating costs for residential properties at an ISRB rating of 5 and below. So I think we're pretty safe there.
Yes,
Sounds like if we start going up, we're okay. What I want clarification on is the commercial. It says that if during the next inspection, Nampa was to drop to a 3 rating, it would have influence on commercial properties. So that's what I'm concerned with our businesses.
Mayor and Councilman Brunner, it is correct. That's what we were told, whether district or city. We would be reduced or raised to an ISRB rating of 3, and that would have influence on commercial insurance rates. It would have no influence on residential if it was 5 and down.
So is there any type of example, Amazon or whatever, what type of increase they would have on insurance if we had a 3 rating, which I'm surmising here, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the opportunity from what Councilman Haverfield was relaying, I would think would be a little higher for a rate to go up by having an expansion than it would if we just stayed with the city limits. But
Rick, this is page 4. And so maybe I'm sorry, Rick is on the screen. This is page 4 of the packet. If someone's trying to find this particular comment, excuse me for interrupting.
no, that's fine.
Sorry.
Anytime.
Oh, the executive summary.
Executive summary. Right,
And I should have clarified that, yes.
page 4 in the full
Proposed
packet.
annexation FAQs.
So Mayor and Councilman Brunner, I guess to not answer your question, but give it a shot. We did ask the ISRB representative what insurance companies we could call to get those data points for council. He was unable to give us anybody that we could specifically call that was within Nampa. He said just call some insurance personnel. And I would tell you that we were told on a couple occasions that there are some commercial businesses, such as a large one like Amazon, who do not even use, or they don't use the rating for their insurance. They self-insure, or they find something that.
Okay, how about on a small business?
Yeah, and I'm sorry,
I mean,
Councilman Brunner, I didn't-
and that's probably my priority is our small businesses and so on. I thought I could get a big figure.
I wish, Councilman Brunner, I wish I had a specific answer for you.
Okay, so to me, that is something that I need to have an answer to protect our businesses. And I don't know how quickly we can get that, but,
I guess Mayor and Councilman Brunner, we would not have that number in time for this decision tonight. And
Right.
I would suggest to you that the only way we would be able to get back to a 2 rating is to grow and put fire stations in specific areas of the, when it comes to the fire department side of ISRB ratings. The only thing we can do to improve our rating chances are to add fire stations and personnel.
but we're automatically going to be this next year a 3 is what you said.
Based on call volume growth and all the data points that they would use. If we would have been rated in 2019 versus 2018, we would have been rated at a 3.
Okay, let me move on then. And this is regarding the potential of 5 new commissioners. And I believe and you guys did such a wonderful job with reaching out to the community, but I think you mentioned to me that it's not been easy even trying to find 3 commissioners to run. So my question on commissioners, we have 5 districts. Sounds like what I'm reading in these FAQs, that is, if we can find them, there will be 1 from each district, but that's not a for sure, right?
Councilman Brunner, yeah, we will have to have 5
Okay,
commissioners.
so my concern is how low are we reaching to try to find someone, anyone and everyone that happens to talk and walk at the same time? I'm being sarcastic here. But how do we find those individuals and vet those individuals to make sure they're going to make the proper decisions for the whole district but most important for the city of Nampa.
Mayor and Councilman Bruner, and all council, this is something that you should consider. I would suggest first that the increase in the budget that they would see as the fire district would be significant. And I would hope that we would have astute citizens such as yourself that would be concerned with how that money is being spent. I do believe that it would be not only the piece that would attract those commissioners to run. I would suggest that most likely one of you or all of you will be recruiting for me to find the right people.
Okay, there's a
for
lady in the
commission.
back, in fact.
Oh, Tara did tell me that she had plenty of people that would be interested.
She's good. So Chief Davies, did you started to raise your hand, if I may, Mayor?
I don't want to take away from what Chief Carpenter's saying, but I'd let him continue. I can add to it if
Okay, and I would appreciate that. Thanks.
so. Mayor, Councilman Brunner, in regards to commissioner seats and filling 5, right now we have 3. And actually, we just, at the last meeting, they had to declare one of our commissioners had to resign because he moved out of the area. And so the board had to declare a vacancy in the commissioner seat, and the process for then filling that vacancy is to advertise, which they did. Sunday, there was an ad in the Press Tribune notifying everyone that there is a vacant seat on our board right now that we need to fill. If persons are interested, they're asked to apply, essentially, to fill a current vacancy. Those applications will come back, commissioners will consider the applicants and select a person to fill that vacant seat. They'll fill that vacant seat through the end of the current term of that commissioner's position and then have to file for election and run for that position in the future. If the district goes to a 5-member board, whenever that happens, at the following election, in the next November general election, all 5 commissioners have to file and run for election.
In 2021.
2021. So even though incumbents that are sitting in seats that have a term still, that would take them beyond that, they have to file, and if they want to continue to be a commissioner, file and run for that seat, their seat. They have to live in the district they represent. And so, yeah, we are very concerned about getting qualified commissioners in these seats. Qualified meaning, ones that are not just that are interested in it, but, are committed to it. Because even though our budget is going to increase, our commissioners aren't paid what you're paid as city council members. They work on a meeting basis, and they're not in it for the money.
I'm sorry, they're meeting once a month though?
Once a month,
Once
yeah.
a month.
Once a month. But, so.
So what happened?
$75 for a meeting if they make
Okay,
it,
what happens in the scenario that we do not have, I realize I guess it's possible, there's no
There is a
ordinance or what if we don't get one individual from every district then by the time of election time of 2021 that file? So how do you handle it then?
There's a procedure for that position to be filled, and I believe it involves us county commissioners. I might have to defer to
Okay.
our city.
And then
our
that's
district
not a
attorney.
key, I'm just,
But,
go ahead.
yeah.
Bill's going to speak to
Sure.
that.
Bill Punkety, I'm the attorney for the Nampa Fire Protection District and a lot of other rural fire protection districts. So in that set of circumstances, that vacancy would be filled by the other elected board members. So if we weren't able to get a full slate of 5 to run and we had one vacancy, in that first meeting in January, we'd declare that vacancy, publish a notice, and within 60 days, we would fill that position.
Okay.
So, and that's the statutory process under Idaho code.
And each district, I mean, just a scenario, I take it you could have one of the 5 districts that would have 3 individuals running and no?
Oh, yes, that's correct. It's just like for your seat on the city
Yeah.
council, as many people as want it can run for it.
Okay, so then you could have another one where there'd be 0 or 1 running in another district. I mean, the numbers could be all over the place.
Just like any election.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Very good, thanks.
So, again, as you look at this proposed 5 sub-district map, you might wonder why you got those odd-shaped zones or sub-districts. Well, they follow voting precinct boundaries. When it comes to elections, the county wants to have, they don't want to have voting precincts that are split or divided by a boundary. So we have these odd-shaped. But in addition to that, they have to be as equal as practical as possible in population and area. So if you look at these population numbers in the legend on this chart, you'll see the population numbers on the far right-hand column of each sub-district, and that's about as close as we can get to making them equal within the confines of voting precincts that we have to deal with. Now, that was based on 2010 census data. In 2020 census data comes out, these districts may change somewhat. We'll have to take another look at that.
Thank you.
All right.
Councilman Brunner, did that conclude your questions?
No,
Oh, you've got more.
I'm sorry.
No, that's good. I just
'Cause
wasn't sure.
I bugged Doug all day today. Yeah, he was probably ready. I'm glad we can't carry in the city so far. So.
Okay, so next question.
I noticed in the 10% that it looked like most of those who were negative towards this were outside of the city limits. And so I'm just wondering from a PR standpoint, I mean, there again, like Councilman Haverfield said, our focus is the city limits. But how do we bring those people? I mean, if we go to this district, because they know they're going to be paying a little bit more, even though at this point, doesn't sound like a lot. But they are concerned, and in my estimation, in my logic, they're going to get much better service. So you know, and as Councilman Rodriguez said, you pay for what you get. But it sounded like they were not quite on board like a lot of the 90% that were mainly from the city of Nampa.
So Mayor and Councilman Brunner, I unfortunately, I would need to rely on my team because they did a lot of the collection and unfortunately Amy is the brunt of most of that. I did read all of those reviews up until about a week ago. So I did read some of but all I was reading was the negative review. I didn't actually
not
look.
noticing where they were from.
I could only imagine that some of them may be upset that we were asked by council to get the citizens of Nampa's perspective. And so maybe there's some feelings that we didn't look outside of the.
And this may be a combination of Doug or whatever. So HR and payroll during this transition time for 21. So is the district all through 21 using all our different entities? Okay, and so that the city will continue to pay for those expenses all through 21. Did you?
Well, the city will pay, but the fire district will reimburse us according to our agreements that we currently have in place right now.
Okay.
So as long as we're providing the service, there will be a fee for that service. And now if we stop providing a service, then we will lose that fee.
But currently, that's what the agreement is that we would continue to do that even past our fiscal year of September 30th of 21, we would continue.
If it went beyond that and they wanted to continue services, we would continue a fee for service arrangement.
You would budget accordingly, a quarter of the 21-22 budget.
Yes.
For that.
We will have to, because the tax revenue will not be available to fund the district until January of 2022, if I understand
correct.
correctly.
You are correct.
So we will be budgeting Q4 it's the first quarter of 22, which is the last calendar quarter of 21, to fund the fire district. Yeah.
But should the fire district elect to continue payroll services beyond January, then we would continue on a fee for service.
Okay, and we're okay in doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We have the van. Okay, Doug, I think Chief, I think I'm done. I think I just have a couple more things for Doug. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
And by the way, I mean, Doug went beyond the call of duty. He got me the side-by-side, which some of you others probably did not see. So but I had some community folks out there that had some questions, and boy, he spent some email time today. So I appreciate that consideration for our citizens. My question, Doug, to you is first of all, there was a little discrepancy in what I heard. I thought I was hearing from the chief that even with the district, we wouldn't be seeing seeing a station in 22. Maybe I heard that wrong, but what I saw by your side by side, I thought we would have Station 6 by 2022 and Station 7 by 2025.
Councilman Brunner, that is correct, where we could afford it. Unfortunately, we probably couldn't. We could, but we would have to start construction like very, very quickly
To do that.
to be
So,
there on time. So
there'd
the
the
funds
money-
would be
there'd
there.
The monies to do
Yeah,
it,
yes.
but okay. So what we're talking about a difference in being able, so the funds though actually would be there just in 2024. Would there actually be a station in 2024 if the city kept it?
well, if the city kept it, we wouldn't begin to build it until 2024. So
So
whether
it'd
it's
be
done,
2025 before we actually would service
Yeah.
our citizens.
probably.
Okay, in the same way here, it'd be 2023, and then maybe. The other thing, and this has probably nothing, but I just noticed, Doug, in your side-by-side figures, that there was equipment, a big difference between the amount of equipment cost, $500,000 between the Station 6 and Station 7, if ran by the district.
Right.
And maybe that's just a common sense thing, you just don't need.
No,
much
what I know what you're talking, what that was in 2021, there was $500,000 of cost in the district and $7.5 million in 2022. And in the cities, I had that entire $8 million in 2020, the next year. It's just they had $500,000 being spent earlier, probably for planning and.
But this was in the district comparison. 22 had 500,000 more for equipment than 2025 state. And then station number 7. There again, that's not a
Yeah.
big deal. I don't want you to have to go
I
through.
think
every-
when you add up the years, it adds together. I think that one district spent some money earlier.
And the other thing I did not see in these side-by-side comparisons was the the 1.5 million for pay and benefits so that's even across the board.
Well, that's in there. If you look at the city side, yeah, the district has it built into their numbers. I isolated it on the city side because I wanted that to show out, but in the district numbers, that's built into their totals.
Okay, so the city, we had 8 million for the building, 1.5, I'm rounding this, 1.5 million for the equipment and 150,000 for other, for a total of 9,700,000.
Right.
So for the city, as far as the employment is not in there?
No, if you look up on the city's line, you'll see in 2024, there's a line of $1.5 million below the labor and benefits.
Okay, I must have missed that, okay.
Yeah, that's in there for 2024 and 2025.
Okay, Mayor, I think you can shut me up.
Mayor Kling,
Okay,
could I follow up on Darrell's information
Okay.
before,
that'll be
for Sandy?
Councilman.
This question is for Chief Davies and for Doug. When Chief Davies, when the district says that they want to increase their budget by 3%, what does the 3% amount? What is that amount?
It's 3% of the highest property tax budget in the last 3 years that they have the ability to raise the property tax portion of their budget by.
Okay,
It's the same as the city.
So,
what number would that be?
for example, if the property tax budget were $15 million, which is kind of where it starts in 2021, and you're talking 3%, it's about $450,000. Because 1% is 150 times 3 is 450. So that's about what that would be if they charge the full 3% in year one. Now, of course, in successive years, it accumulates and becomes larger, but that's where it would start.
And that is approximately 1% of the city budget.
Yes,
So a 1% increase in our budget is a 3%
okay.
Yes.
in fire.
It'd be around 500,000 or so.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's the number I wanted to hear. Sorry,
Thank
Gene, I had to put that in there.
Okay, Councilman Bauer.
I'd like to give Sandy opportunity to speak first,
Okay.
since I'm the youngest. I'd like, if Sandy would like to speak first, I'd like to give her that.
You are the
I love that. That was great.
Youngest on council.
Councilman Levi.
Thank you, Councilman Bauer. Now we all know that I am older than you. I appreciate that. Okay.
You're served.
So I do have a list of questions, but I want to go back and explore the councilman's 3%. So that 3%, if I understood correctly, comes from the property assessments and the levy. Was that correct? Did I understand you correctly?
Richard?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, so if that's the case, then our citizens are still going to feel that because their assessment of their property went up. And so they're going to be paying an increased value assessment, correct?
Over time, but what's the differential there, which is what Ozzy referred to, is that right now the levy rate applied to the district is a little bit different than the levy rate applied to the city. So you have an equalization, which I think is what was driving the district to pay a little more in property taxes out of the gate and the city a little less because of that differential in the rate. That's where it would start. Over time, of course, the increase would be calculated, will be impacted both by in terms of valuation of the homes and how much the district decided to charge up to their legislatively allowed limits.
Okay, thank you. I'm taking notes, so I apologize in the delay. So we have Nampa residents that they will still be paying taxes to the city of Nampa, but they'll also be taxed for the fire district through their county tax. Is that correct?
Well, let me clarify that. When the district will go, if the district goes forward and they begin to levy, the city will pull back our levy. It may not be exactly one for one because we're still absorbing services that we're providing to the district, but our levy will go down and it will be very, very noticeable.
So kind of further expanding on that, so as if the district were to move forward and they build more stations and they need to buy equipment and they need to staff with personnel, where does the funding for that come from?
Mayor and Councilwoman Levi, the funding for the facilities that are new, as well as the apparatus that are new, would be coming from impact fees. The funding for the personnel and all equipment that needs to be updated or replaced would come from property tax and the sales tax revenues.
So as we get more stations and there's more demand for stations, then our taxpayers in the end are still paying the bill for that, correct?
Well, yes. Whether they, well, there's a timing differential here, but whether we do it in the city or whether it's done by the district, there will be related cost increase for rolling out the new fire station. There's no way to avoid that. However, the benefit of rolling out with the district is that they're able to leverage some additional revenues, most notably the $500,000 a year from shared sales tax revenues that I cannot leverage as a city. So it may not be a significant amount, but it would temper the increase in the cost increase to the broader district than I could accomplish if we do it in the city.
Okay. So my next two questions kind of go hand in hand. I've heard it stated from our council and in others that that 16 million that we're saving by not paying out directly to the fire department through the city frees us up with that 16 million to put it other places. Is that correct in that thinking? I'm going to kind of expound on that, but I want to make sure, one, I even have my foundation correct.
Let me help clarify a little bit. While the total revenue is $16 million, that's not how much new property taxes would be going out. It's right now the district pays to the city a fee of about 16% of the expenses, which amounts to $2.5 million. So their assessment, they funnel a significant portion of that back to the city. The city itself uses between about $11 million of property tax monies, plus the $2.5 million from the district, plus fees and services the city provides. So it's not $16 million. Legally, we're not required to take down our levy assessment. We could technically leave it at the full value assessed to the fire department, which is, I guess, I'd estimate it about between 10 and $11 million, but that's probably not the wisest thing to do from a cost perspective. So we would be pulling down our levy to the citizens, and I'm guessing it would be at least a $10 million decrease, what we would pull out of the levy, and maybe more.
And so if I'm understanding this correctly, and I apologize because I don't speak accountant and you do a marvelous job of breaking this down, but I might have missed it. So in my mind, and also from the citizens that have been talking to me, that now working on the figure of 11 million, are we going to distribute the 11 million that we're not spending on the fire department amongst other needs in the city, or are we going to reduce taxes to our citizens?
Well, the first response is that's a council decision on what to do with that. But my guess is the council would vote to reduce the taxes and not redistribute that to other departments.
Okay, because that is one of the things that people commented to me when they were taking the survey, and I haven't looked at the survey for a while, but that they were of the opinion that if they voted fire district, that automatically meant a reduction in taxes to them through the city of Nampa. And so I don't know if they properly understand that either.
Well, if the council chooses to reduce the taxes by the amount we're not having to incur expense for the district, then it would become a tax savings to the citizens. It's not necessarily automatic, but I think it would be about 99.99% that it would happen.
Okay. So one other comment, which I often make, especially when we have items before us or public hearings about growth and development taking place in that southwest corner where we have needed Station 6 for so many years, I'm more often than not, I vote against it because I know we cannot offer the proper coverage of response time in the fire from the firefighters to that property. One, putting the liability on the property owner and also putting our personnel in danger. And so in one aspect, because I've heard it mentioned again tonight, when we look at how we are growing our city and approving development, it's really something we have to take into consideration. And maybe not all growth and all development needs to be happening as soon or as quickly as we think it does. We need to maybe control it or be a little bit more balanced because of the services we can afford to offer and what we actually have available. And I know I sound like a broken record with that, but I'm going to say that again. A couple other things, and one, this was brought to me by a couple of our citizens, is when we have negotiated with our public safety personnel in the past, have they been viewing those negotiations in light of, are we going to be giving personnel raises and insurance, et cetera, or are we viewing the fact of the overall good for the city of Nampa and realizing we need to build stations and we need to get more personnel and we need to have equipment? And is that something that's being balanced in negotiations? Which goes kind of along with this next comment, is we have these fire commissioners who are solely focused on the fire district. That is the only thing they're focused on. So they're focused on making sure those needs are taken care of and making sure they secure the funds that they need. But the difference I see, and I think this might back up a little bit of what Councilman Haverfield was talking to or speaking to, is as city council people, we aren't focused on one thing. We are taking in account the big picture of the entire budget in light of the needs of the city and our taxpayers. So when I'm looking at commissioners that represent these different districts, while that looks like a good idea, but if they're solely focused on a fire district, they're not understanding the other needs of the city, and they're maybe not seeing the big overall picture that needs to be seen. So I kind of look at that and I'm thinking, I don't know if we really would get the fair representation that we needed. Again, I'm not slighting those who are commissioners and those who would want to be at the fire district. It's just a reality that we as city council people understand as elected officials and as voices for the people. Just a couple other comments, and I guess they're not really comments, questions as much as comments. But in the last, as Councilman Haverfield also alluded to, in his last 6 years, and in mine, and also as person that sat in the audience for years, this fire district thing seems to surface about every 18 months to 2 years. And as I've been asked, what really is the underlying drive from the fire department with this? And it goes back to one of the questions that someone asked me again today, is if their drive is really to have adequate fire protection throughout the city, then is that being considered when negotiations are happening from our public safety personnel? And that's not to slight anyone, but I do think it's a worthy question to consider. And then another thing, let's see, there was a comment made about securing commissioners, and the comment was made that there was a substantial increase in the budget because it was significant, that it would probably spur interest from people to serve on the commission. That kind of raised flags in my mind, and I don't know if I misunderstood it, but I'm thinking significant increase to our taxpayers who are already overburdened, and because of this COVID thing, a lot of them have had their way of life limited as to what's happening and what happens if we do experience another recession, because in some sense we have. And so I'm not sure, and somebody can clarify that for me. And I'll let, if somebody wants to clarify that, and then I'll just wrap it up with my last two comments.
Councilman Levi, this is Chief Carpenter. I'll try and clarify the best I can. The statement was made that in seeking out council or commission currently, our budget is fairly small in comparison to most taxing agency or entities. If an annexation was to take place, that budget would become significantly larger when the transfer of funds would really transfer, or the parcels would transfer to the district, creating a much larger budget. Not necessarily, again, as Doug Racine said, it would be the will of the council as to what amount council lowered their levy rate, but so it's not necessarily an increase of cost at the time of annexation. It's the larger budget that people would have interest in managing. It would bring people that were more, they would see a higher risk with that much more money and have more concern with its use. And we believe that would attract more people that would be desired to be a commissioner.
Oh, thank you, Chief. I really appreciate that explanation. My final two comments, and I know that when I spoke to Chief Carpenter at one of the fire town halls here recently, I made both of these comments. In 2 years from now, am I going to look back and say, oh, I didn't think about that, I didn't know to ask that question, or I'm going to regret making this decision? And as was pointed out near the beginning of this presentation tonight by our new legal counsel, was once we go into this, because of the seriousness of it, once we go into and enter into this contract, if that's what we do, it's going to be hard to reverse it or get out of it. And so I look at how serious this is, and I want to be able to 2 years from now say, I understood this, and I believe I made a right decision. I am comfortable in owning it. So my last question statement is, which I also asked the chief at that time, is what question or questions are there that I don't know to ask that I should be asking in order to help me 2 years from now say, I'm glad I made my decision, whichever way that decision is. And if somebody has input that I have missed or what they feel would be valuable, whether it's council or staff, I would definitely appreciate that. And with that, I will respectfully allow you to answer my questions, and then I will, from the old Councilwoman Levi, yield my time to our young Councilman Bauer.
That's right. Mayor, Councilwoman Levi, I think the questions that I think we will all look at this decision and realize the weight of what you're considering. And we all do ask ourselves the question of, in 2 years, am I going to look back and make or wonder if I would have made that decision? And an easy answer, I guess, is, well, hindsight will be 2020 whenever we are 2 years from now. What I would suggest is there are some reasons why this time and this moment is important. And I guess I would ask Ozzie if he would be interested in adding to what questions that you haven't asked that maybe he's aware of, because I know that timing is critical to this specific decision today. And then we can move from there.
Well, hi, this is Oz. The reason timing's critical is because of the growth in property values. Because they've been escalating over the last couple of years and they've been relatively at the same level, the math works well on the annexation. If you go into a downturn, the way the math works is you're using current property values with last year's levy rate. So you'd have a lower property value matched with the lower levy rate, and that doesn't generate as much income to the new district as it will if we have a next year. And once again, we won't know these numbers until next year arrives, but if our property values consistently stay at and do high single digit, low double digit growth, everything will match and it'll work well. The risk is a downturn when we're trying to do this process, because then the math works against the district. And that's really the biggest reason why we've really kind of put a lot more pressure this time under the scenario than maybe has happened in the past, is because this is a unique growth environment in the market. So I hope that answers your question.
Mayor and Councilman Levi, this is Richard Davies here speaking now. Councilman Levi, I think your question is good, and as you're concerned about 2 years from now, looking back, will you be able to say I made the right decision? And as Chief Carpenter alluded, hindsight is always 2020. If we look back at what's happened in the last 13 years since the last station, I can tell you that if nothing changes, we're, as far as the direction of the fire department and funding level, funding ability and focus on adding new stations, that the city is not going to be better off. The trend is to getting worse. And we want to, and the whole purpose of coming forward with this proposal for annexation by the district is to stop the bleeding, to stop it from getting worse, to begin to turn the trend to a better service for the citizens and the residents of Nampa. So as you think about the decision you're making tonight, think about the consequences of not making the decision tonight. Not making this decision for this annexation to go forward. Those consequences you can see. You can see what they will be just based on the past 13 years.
Okay, Councilwoman Levi, do you have any further questions at this time?
No, I will mull that over, and thank you so much. I apologize. I tried to comment earlier, but I couldn't get it to unmute in time. So thank you for your answers, and it gives me some more food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Bauer.
Well, this is a very, very hard decision. It's not an easy decision. It's something that I've weighed heavily upon for, a long time now. I trust, Doug. I trust Richard. Richard's one of the smartest people I know. He was responsible for the quick response vehicles, back in the day. I don't always agree with either of them. I disagree with both of them at times. And I've also reached out to a lot of I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. There's a lot of people smarter than me. So I've reached out to a lot of people, concerned citizens, and even, there's a lot of people that I I talk to multiple people, both sides are very, very intelligent, and they disagree on this topic. So it's it's not easy. It's not easy to decide. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen. I would like to say to you two, from kind of my research, if we do have a tank in our economy, whether it be now or 10 years, you're not going to have the city to fall back on. And so just with the uncertain times and the, things like that, it's just something we got to realize that, you're on your own.
Mayor and Councilman Bauer, yes, that is one of the things as a fire chief and as a department we would have to strategically plan for. We do know through the modeling that it would be tough no matter if we're with the city or the district. We can show data that we could weather a 7-year downturn without layoffs. Obviously, that would take the work of the whole organization, not just the chiefs. I mean, if it wasn't a buy-in by the whole, then layoffs would occur at some point. But to weather a large downturn is capable within the district's ability.
When it comes to, I may be different than some of my fellow, councilmen and councilwomen up here. I like the idea of elected officials as commissioners. I think it's a form of democracy, and you'll be accountable to the people. It's kind of like the school district right now. There was people that didn't run for the school district. I can guarantee you with what's going on with the schools, people are going to be running for school districts and being very attention to it. Whether you're pro or, Gene or me, different sides, whatever, it's now polarized. Now people are going to be paying attention to the school district, and people will now be running and having more attention. Same with the fire district. If the people feel they're reckless or, just overspending, then people will get involved. And, and likewise, you're always with this, especially with fire, you're accountable to the people in those districts. So that's actually, I may disagree. I actually like that. I think it's a form of democracy, and it's what our founders wanted, is to have accountability to the people, and the people could vote people in if they weren't happy with those decisions. When it comes down to it, I have to make the best decision for the citizen. That's who I ran for. I ran for the citizens. I've reached out to a lot of them, and it's been hard because a lot of them just don't know, and a lot of them don't have an opinion. So this has been a very difficult decision, because when I go talk, hey, what's your opinion? They don't have a clue, and they don't have an opinion. I think it's something we're not going to see down the road, and like my coach said here, I really have to make a decision for what's best for the people. So as I talk to Doug, because I feel like Fire Station 6 will be built in the future. It has to be. I think we all agree that. And I think the citizens will demand that sooner or later, whether it be, and I will never take foregone. I'm just telling you, I will never take foregone. That was one of my promises when I ran. And so if Fire Station 6 is built, that will increase the taxes for the citizens of Nampa, and it will significantly. So when I look at Doug's number, if it gets built through the commission, it does spread it out. The $500,000 doesn't matter. And so that, I feel like the citizen, I feel like it's best for the citizen, not only because of it's spread out, and not because of the, the 500,000 that we mentioned, but we limit our government by doing this. And I'm a fan of limited government. And so our city drastically decreases. And I think as a council, and I really like this council, I think we could make we'll have some very important decisions from this decision, whether it happens or not. If it happens, then the council will be super responsible what we do with this decrease in government. We can really make some as our city's growing, this will be a way that we could decrease government and decrease taxes if we don't take all that money that we've saved and just spend it somewhere else. If we do it the right way, we can save money. So there's reasons why I'm against it. I would like to be in, not, selfishly, I would like the council to be in control of the fire district, of the fire department. And selfishly, I would like, if I was on city council for 20 years, I would want to vote no, just so I could have control. But just looking at the future of it, I do think it's not as bad shifting it over and letting the people have control of it with the commissioners. So it is a very difficult decision. I think from the experts I've talked to, if it's done right, it could be a benefit to the city.
Mayor Klein?
Yes.
Thanks, Jacob. A comment. The question I would ask myself in 2022 would be, did I or did I not? And did my decision lead to the increased protection of life and property for the residents of Nampa, or did my decision not lead to the increased protection of life and property for residents of Nampa? Because either way, we build Station 6, we need 7, we need 8, we need the personnel to man them. There's going to be an increased cost that somebody's going to bear, whether it's with the city or whether it's with the district. But I think inherent in this decision, I want to ask you a really direct question. Do you believe, Chief, that there was property that could have been saved should you have been able to respond in the adequate amount of time?
Councilwoman Mutchie, yes, I do believe that.
Do you believe there are lives or a life that has been lost because you were not able to respond in adequate time?
And I would say, council, that is my fear. I don't want to be a fire chief and own that, and I know you don't want to be council and own that. Do I know that we could have made a different impact? Yes. Statistically, we can prove that we could have made different impacts based upon the response to those calls.
So somebody's life outcome would have been different had you been there earlier.
Councilwoman Mutchie, yes. Based on scientific data, the time it takes for us to arrive would impact the result of the call, whether it is fire or EMS.
So even if we went out to bond, that would get us potentially Station 6, but we still need 7 and 8. So it'd be a short-term solution to get us 6, which would be great still, but we still would not have a consistent mechanism to get to 7 and to get to 8. And 17 years in between stations, if this council said, we won't approve any additional annexation, we're not going to be around for that. We have no control over what the next mayor and the next council members decide to do. So again, when we already know today in 2020, we're asking a question in 2022, that we've lost property and we've had lives considerably impacted negatively by the reduction in response time, I absolutely believe we have an obligation to our residents to act in their best interest. And I believe that is going to a district.
Mayor, I promise, this, two questions, but they won't take long, they just hit me. So on these, on the elections for the commissioners in 2021, what are their terms? And are they going to be staggered?
Councilman Werner, yes, they are 4-year terms. However, depending on legal's direction, 2 of them are going to be a half term because of that we need the cycle to.
So if the citizens do not like what's going on, they want other commissioners, don't have to wait 4 years on all of them. Okay. The other question is, remind me when union negotiations are for fire.
Councilman Bruner, Mayor, those would start this year in February.
Okay,
Not this year, sorry, in 2021, February.
So the city would be responsible for the union negotiations. I'm seeing a nod. And is there limitations then, Bill, as far as then, could there only be then a 1-year contract, or how does that work? Or maybe it wasn't as short as I thought.
Councilman Bruner and Mayor, Councilman Skog negotiated a several-year contract, and that's what year will be in that end year of the contract in 2021. So the budget year we're currently in has already been negotiated. What will be negotiated is for the year after. So it would take an agreement, which I would tell you, I believe the local would be willing to agree to not negotiate until they were transferred to the district.
Which would be 22.
Which would be
January or
2022.
February of 22.
So their next negotiation, should the annexation occur, would happen with
Okay.
the commissioners.
So, I mean, I would appreciate that being, I don't know if it has to be legally in the contract or what, but where the city is not responsible for the negotiations in 21.
Madam Mayor and
For a few, yeah, go ahead, I'm
and
sorry.
Councilmember Bruner, I think the agreement, if I recall correctly, I'll look while we talks about assigning any agreements that exist with the city to the district. I'm not sure if the city can commit to that with the existing agreement, but Chief, maybe you have some insight there.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. So I think actually, if you're getting legal advice, it's probably better than mine. I can tell you with the conversations, this is something that I've obviously needed to be proactive with, because the realization of that they wouldn't be negotiating with the city was there. What I believe would occur, and we would need to make sure is the current contract, which has been negotiated by the city, would just extend through, and they would stay on that contract through 2021.
And that's what I'm asking.
And then the negotiation for their new saying with the fire district would have to occur once the commissioners were responsible for the employees.
So that's what I was saying. So on the agreement calls out right now, on the transition of operations date, which is that January 2022, when everything goes to them, the city assigns its rights and obligations to the district in regard to the labor contract. So it's assigning that to the district. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, that's correct. And so if there are negotiations in 2021, then whatever that agreement is that the city makes would be assigned to the district on January 1, 2022. That's an agreement we would accept. And the city has an obligation to proceed in good faith. So just like in any other labor negotiation, you'd want to cut the best possible deal available, both for the residents as well as, to keep labor happy. Does that answer your question, Councilmember?
Yeah, so what you're saying is we would be responsible for the union negotiations in 2021.
In 21, that's correct,
And then
yes.
the district would just go ahead and take whatever was decided at that point in time until they had their next contract negotiation.
That's correct.
I would recommend, though, that we ask the union to postpone. And we could certainly do that. And I think with the decision to go to a district, we could certainly ask them to do so. Would that be correct? Right. And I think that we as a city would. Yes.
Madam Mayor and Council, I agree with what you're suggesting, and I think based on what Chief Carpenter has suggested, that the union would be willing to just let the current contract with the city extend those 3 months without negotiating new benefits, just let that ride. Any contract then that is negotiated in 2021 with the union should be with the commissioners because it will be for 2022, January 1.
Fully agree.
Mayor Kling.
Yes.
I have a question and then an observation. Question, Chief. With the transfer of real property to the district, which would be the buildings, grounds, and vehicles, maintenance is the question that I have. Who is responsible for maintaining the buildings, the grounds, and the vehicles?
Mayor and Councilman Haverfield, it would be the district, as it takes ownership of those assets, would be responsible for the care and maintenance of those. Within the agreement during the year that we would still operate under the city, those funds have already been budgeted for within the current budget year that we're in. So
Our current fleet services would not be responsible for those vehicles then?
They would still be under the agreement that's the contract that we're currently in. So those items have already been budgeted for, but I do see legals.
Yeah, I think the chief's doing a really good job. I just want to be very, very clear that during 2021, so the city has already passed a budget which includes line items for the fire department for 2020, 2021. So even though that property would transfer to the district, the city would continue to pay for it through the end of the fiscal year, and then that last quarter, and then the district would take up January on current reserves, and then they'd get their first property tax check in 2022, January 2022.
So as far as the continuation of an agreement with our fleet services, would that be continued? So the city would enjoy the benefit of the cost of that labor. We'd be able to charge the district for that.
Councilman Haverfield, you are correct. January 1 of 2022, we have no intent of leaving the fleet service that we currently enjoy. What I can tell you is what you see in our budget this year that has been approved due to the what I believe the correct decision council made, you can see what that income would be for the city based on this year's numbers. And we would have that same charge based on our new number.
Right, so you'd have to cover that cost.
Correct. We would also, sorry, Councilman Haverfield, we would also be interested in continuing contract for service as of right now and discussing with our leadership team. And we believe that it would, if we were to leave all services, it would be phased. But we would be interested in finance. And then there was interest to staying with the facilities contracts that we enjoy with the city. And so those would be monies we would be paying to the city.
So the facilities then would be able to provide the service of maintenance of those buildings. So any cost associated with upgrades, if you were to lose a HVAC unit or whatever, that's on the district. The city is not responsible for any of that, correct?
Councilman Haverfield, you are January 1 of 2022, that would be correct. The only assets that you retain that we have license to use but agree to maintain are the admin office that we're in currently downtown. So if we burn that down for some reason, it would be on the city to replace through insurance. And then the ground at the training ground still would be owned by the city. Now, we went through that license agreement. We have the agreement that we care for and maintain and ask permission for any modifications to the properties. So, but the ownership is still with the city.
Okay, well, if the ownership stays with the city, then, and the maintenance of those buildings are your responsibility, or are they the city's responsibility?
Yeah, no, it is ours, but go ahead.
Oh, sure.
If you're a tenant in the building, that's one thing. Because if we're retaining ownership, normally you retain the responsibility for maintaining the building. So that's where there needs to be clarity there. Just because we still own it doesn't mean that are we absolved from any of that additional cost of maintaining it?
No, under the agreement, so under the license agreements, the district, starting January 2022, is responsible for all maintenance.
Okay, and currently Parks and Rec is handling most of the ground maintenance, is that correct?
Councilman Haverfield, you are correct.
So would you have a service agreement with them to maintain the grounds then?
Councilman Haverfield, that is one service agreement we would probably not continue.
Okay, so you'd take care of them yourself then?
You would see firefighters mowing lawns and shoveling walks. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So Mayor, Councilman,
I-
before you go on though, can I just follow up with the maintenance? Or do you have more maintenance questions?
I have a general observation next, so go
Okay,
ahead.
so if you, I'd appreciate it if I could. So I just want, make sure clarification. So we own the administration building, the city maintains, we own the training grounds. But what you're saying then, as of the transition time of January 22, even though the city owns those two properties, the district would have the cost of maintaining that and replacing anything. I like that. Okay. I just want to make sure that's.
And fleet services payment. I think we do need some clarity on that.
Yeah, we need to look.
Because as an owner, that's not how it normally works.
Right.
Well, this isn't like your standard.
I'm sorry,
lease.
Councilman Haverfield.
No, that's my
This isn't
point.
like a lease. It's a licensed use. So it's not like there's rent being paid. So we have a license subject to the terms of the agreement, and Todd's looking at.
Section 4.
Okay.
So I'm looking at, for example, the administrative office.
Right.
Casualty loss insurance is required to be maintained by the district, covering damage to the office during the term of the agreement with a responsible insurance company at the sole cost and expense of the district. In the name and for the benefit of the district and the city, the sum sufficient to cover the cost of repair and replacement.
So could I ask another question regarding that? So during the season, I think it's up to 3 years that the fire district would have the privilege of using that building at no cost. If there were to, the utilities, did we address the utilities? And I'm sure I got to know, you guys are covering the utilities, but what happens if the HVAC goes down, for example? Or is this, because if the district's using it at no cost, I think maybe the district would have to cover if there were a major maintenance issue, so we may need to put that in there.
That was my point.
Yeah.
Again, if we're not getting any revenue and we're having to pay for any maintenance related light fixtures or HVAC equipment. So that's just clarity needs to be provided there.
Madam Mayor and Bill, correct me if you see something different, but under stewardship, the district agrees to possess, use, and maintain the administrative office and perform a list of duties. And one of those is be fully responsible at all times, and it's at its expense for the maintenance of the administrative office and all of its facilities and utilities in reasonably operable condition, without injury to the city's real property.
Okay, so I think that answers it. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I didn't know that off the top of my head. I should have, but thank you.
Mayor, since Darrell jumped on me, I've got another question then. Just for a point of clarity, Councilwoman Levi asked about the taxation and the levy. There was some clarity given as far as potential lower levy rate that the citizens would enjoy. But what we were told earlier is that the tax difference is net neutral. So there's really no benefit from a taxable standpoint that a citizen of Nampa is going to realize initially. It's net neutral, correct?
Councilor Haverfield, and then Doug, I'll hand it over to you and even Ozzie. In the numbers in which they were figured at the time of the Galena Consulting statistics, at that exact time with the levy rates and the valuation of the home values, it was a savings to the city, but it was that specific time. And so when we were out in the public, we really went to the net neutral because that number that you're speaking of for the city of Nampa residents is what you have control over. You have the full control over what that number is going to be. And so knowing that that's net neutral to them. So we went to net neutral even though the first data showed there was a savings.
So there's nothing saying that, I mean, to her point, I think she was, or at least what I was hearing is, hey, there's a potential savings here, but really we were told earlier that there wasn't. It was just basically a wash going across. The benefits are elsewhere to be found, correct?
Councilman Haverfield, you're correct in the property tax realm.
Okay, so thank you. And so I'm just going to make a general observation. You can sit down then, Chief. In 2013, when I ran for city council, the major issue that we were dealing with back then, as you remember, was urban renewal. And the costs associated with the Idaho Center and an urban renewal agency that, although good-hearted people served, they weren't fiscally responsible for what they were dealing with. And the cost associated to the city was at a rate of about $1.7 million a year for the Idaho Center and about $600,000 to $700,000 a year for the Civic Center. All I'm saying is it took a while for us to get that righted. Good people, I think, with fiscal a basis that a fiscal responsibility came in and made some difficult decisions to be able to get that ship righted. And we are moving in the right path now. I think all that to say, back to Jacob's point, and maybe elsewhere, the right people need to be in this position of responsibility for this district. Otherwise, we might see another, even though they're good-hearted people, we might see a situation where, again, we're faced with an urban renewal that's out of control board, but it being a fire district board. Because what they're doing is they're not only building brick and mortar, but they're having to man and provide the equipment for those facilities. So fiscal responsibility, I think, is very key, and that's my concern. Not having a knowledge of who these people are, and if we're able to even find adequate, responsible people to fill these roles, that's where my concern lies. This board, I don't have a problem with. This council, I think we meet and we deliberate on things well beyond this, but at least we have a fiscal responsibility behind the decisions we're making. And I would want to have some assurances that I don't have right now, because you don't know who these people are. And the fact that you have districts and you can only vote on people within your district, that means there's part of town that might have a saturation of good people and other parts that might not have any interest, or a lack of I don't know. That's my only concern. If it was the whole district that you could run within and be voted on from within, that's one thing. But having this district thing, just like what's coming for city council members, it's going to change the dynamics of how this council's formed, how that district's formed. So I've been on both sides of the table here. I've been involved as a commissioner with a taxing district being the Napa Development Corporation, and then being on city council. And it's kind of nice to be able to see both sides of that and the dynamics in play. But that's where my concern lies is, I talked about earlier, this is a big decision. I want to make the right decision so that we're not 7 years from now back in the same position we were with the Napa Development Corporation and the Urban Renewal Agency. We have good people, maybe good-hearted people that just weren't fiscally responsible and got us in trouble. So anyway, that's where my concern was. That's my observation.
So Councilman Haverhill, I'm going to do this, and I know my team's going to be upset. I'm going to respond. I worry too. As a fire chief right now, I enjoy some protection underneath the mayor and a council. And I also know that you each have the fire department's well-being at the core. But what I am telling you is this, to me, this is a risk I'm willing to take to ensure and secure the future of the fire department. I will no longer have a mayor to direct me. I'll be directly responsible for this decision, and I can guarantee you that I have 7 years left before I'm going anywhere. And I'll be loud and angry if someone gets onto this board that isn't following the direction of what we set in place over the next year. I am risking everything that I have in my career-wise, and taking this to, and I will take it very seriously, that there is no option but to be responsible, because that's the only way we can get to what I'm telling you is the opportunity. If we are neglectful with our money, if we're irresponsible, I would hope more for the conservative and slow growth through a commission that had questions and didn't believe me. That's what I would hope for more, rather than someone that just allowed me to do what I want to do. Honestly, we hoped that when you were done, you never know what you're going to do next. You live in an area of 3. I think the council is going to experience what you just described. It is going to be a whole different council once a rezone occurs. But I guess I'm sharing with you that I have the same concern, but to secure the future of the fire department, I am willing to risk that fear and be a person of accountability in making sure that it's done responsibly and fiscally sound.
And I appreciate that. And to Jacob's point, if the economy goes south next year, who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, as far as it might change the dynamics of the way that we do business as a country. That's my concern. You're losing the deep pocket that the city can provide in an emergency. So that's the other side of the big brother looking over your shoulder aspect of what we can provide as a council, and under the mayor's direction, you know, as far as being able to interact and maybe move some things around creatively. You won't have that. And so going forward, like I say, my concern is who's going to be running this with you. And if you get hit by a bus walking across the street tonight, you know, the next guy up, that succession planning needs to be really well thought out too. So that's all I need to say.
Councilman Havertz, I agree with you. And one of the things I have told the mayor is we don't know what happens in next election cycle, and I'm more comfortable making that plan right now with the current commission and council that's in place than waiting to see what's the next council. We don't know who the mayor may or may not be, depending upon situation, and we may see some council seats change. I would rather do it right now with the current council and the current commission and the current directors that work for the city, because I know that our department has no intention of disconnecting. We have full intention to be involved in all the areas in which we currently are. I don't have any intention of this position, not me. I agree with you. We have to write a solid enough plan that it doesn't matter who the mayor or the fire chief or the commission are, that our agreements and our direction forward are solid and concrete, and it can't be changed without a very big significant impact from something that I would say must be for the right reason, because it would be changing, because we would be planning it for the right things.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
So at some point I have comments, but I don't want to, I want the council to be able to fully share. So I guess the question for the council right now is, what is the will of the council at this time? Do you have further questions, comments, or are we ready to move into a motion? Okay, so what would be the will of the council?
Mayor, I'm going to make a motion to authorize the mayor to sign a resolution for the agreement of annexation plan, property transfer, and agreement of operations and interagency services contract with the Nampa Fire Protection District.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? We've had a lot of discussion. Okay, we're going to go to roll call. Nate, are you there?
I'm here. Bruder,
Yes.
Levi,
No.
Haverfield,
Mayor and Chief, with all due respect, I'm just not ready. I think that I still need some more information, and as far as citizen buy-in is important to me, and the vetting process of 500 out of 100,000, respondents is still maybe, I'm just not quite there yet, so I'm going to vote no.
Bauer,
Yes.
Mucci,
Yes.
and Rodriguez.
Yes.
And you know what? I'll make my comments at the very end of the evening. So with this first action item, it leads us to the second action item, which are necessary to continue to move forward, which is to authorize the mayor to sign an ordinance consenting to the annexation of the area within the city of Nampa into the Nampa Fire District, and then authorize the summer of publication that would be, that you could do with this ordinance, consenting to the annexation within the area. Item 1.2 would be requested to pass under suspension of rules as we actually, we did not do a consent agenda on the, typically in our consent agenda, there is the authorization to pass under suspension of rules. So I don't know if we need to do anything on that.
Madam Mayor, you would simply need an additional motion to
Pass and request a motion to pass under suspension of rules.
yeah, read by title only and suspend the rules and read by title only. Then do that and then have the motion on the ordinance itself.
Okay. So I would stand for a motion that would allow us to read by title and under suspension of
And no
rules.
further readings.
Okay. So would there be a motion?
So moved, Mayor.
Second, okay. Roll call.
Brunner,
Yes.
Levi,
Yes.
Haverfield,
Not sure if I need to be consistent with my prior vote. I wish you all the best of luck with this. I really do. Yeah. But since the first part's already been approved, I'll go ahead and vote yes as well. And the motion was to sign the ordinance under suspension of rules with no further amendments, and then also to include the summary of publication or not.
No, it was, go ahead, Todd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Haverfield, this first motion is just to suspend the rules and read it by title only. Then
Okay.
you'll do that, assuming the motion passes, and then you'll have a motion on the ordinance itself.
Okay.
And so we had the motion, the second, and then this is the yes. And you said voted yes? Okay. Nate, where are we in our vote?
Bauer.
Bauer,
Yes.
Machi,
Okay.
Yes.
and Rodriguez.
Yes.
Okay. So with that, then we would need a motion to authorize the mayor to sign the ordinance consenting to the annexation of the area within the city of Nampa into the fire district under the suspension of rules with the summary of publication as noted in 1.3.
Madam Mayor, you could also read it by title before you get that motion.
We will, oh, that's right, I forgot. Nate, would you like to read your ordinance?
Sure.
Excuse me, thank you.
I can do that. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Nampa, Idaho, findings of history, authority, purpose, and intent, and consenting to the annexation of the area within the City of Nampa to the Nampa Fire Protection District, and directing the city clerk and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Nate. Todd, thank you for keeping me in line. I appreciate that.
Rules and publication.
Okay, who would like to make that motion?
Oh, he's doing it.
He's doing it, okay,
I'll make the motion, Mayor.
okay.
I'll second.
And roll call.
Brunner,
Yes.
Levi,
No.
Haverfield,
Yes.
Bauer,
Yes.
Machi,
Yes.
and Rodriguez.
Yes.
And then we're to action item 1.4, and this is to consider and take action, declaration of value and intent to convey real property consisting of Nampa Fire Stations 1, 2, 3, and 4 to the Nampa Rural Fire District, Protection District, and authorize the city of clerk to publish the corresponding notice of public hearing, and that public hearing would be held on December 7th.
I'd also make that motion, Mayor.
And I'll second.
Discussion, Mayor, just for a minute. Can I have just a little more clarification what that public hearing would be include?
Clarify. I think,
Actually, Todd, thank you.
Madam Mayor, just to clarify, Bill asked the question, I wasn't completely sure, but that motion on 1.2 and 1.3 after we suspended the rules was to approve both, correct?
Yes, it was. It was. Okay, and then Todd, to answer the question regarding 1.4, why the public hearing on this particular item?
Madam Mayor and council members, the code requires it, short answer. When you declare, or when you're going to transfer property as a city, if you're going to do it to another entity, again, you can do it without cost, but you do have to declare a value and declare your intent to convey. And then the code requires that you have a 14-day notice and a public hearing. Again, this is just on the real property transfer. It doesn't change any of this.
Has nothing to do with the, right, so.
But you do retain your full discretion on the real property transfer going into it, so.
So there could be question from a public person as far as on the value? Or what would be a dissenter be concerned with?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Brunner, typically that would be a question, but that's usually a transfer to something other than a government entity or a government entity for a particular value. In this case, part of the process is to transfer these fire facilities to the fire district at no cost.
Right.
So you're not really arguing about value. Somebody might say, well, we don't think you should give it to them for free. So they might be arguing about that perhaps. And those all fit into the bigger picture of the whole approach.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Kling.
Yes.
Chief, remind me again why fire station number 5 isn't a part of this.
Councilman Haverfield, Fire Station 5 would only be for the structure itself. The city owns the property and would be leasing it to the district through the airport because it is has FAA regulations on it that cannot be transferred.
All right, thank you.
Is there any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, roll call?
Brunner,
Yes.
Levi,
No.
Haverfield,
Yes.
Bauer,
Yes.
Mucci,
Yes.
and Rodriguez.
Yes.
So a couple of comments as we close this evening. I've listened to all the comments and I just want to say I really appreciate the discussion that's taken place. Randy, thank you. I hear your heart in this decision. And I tell you what, and Kirk's shaking his head, yes, it has weighed heavily on all of us because we want to make the right decision. We want to do what's right for our citizens and for our community. You know, you make a decision based on the information that you have at hand. And we've made the best decision we can with the information that we have today. One thing that I have appreciated is that Ann Westcott, who's worked with the city on our impact fees, and Ozzy's a great financial mind, and at Westcott, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Ann said going into it, she had serious question as to whether this would work. And she tried to prove it wrong, that it wouldn't. And what she found as she looked at the numbers was that it did make sense. And Councilwoman Levi mentioned that the fire district surfaces every 18 months to 2 years. Well, the last time I remember it surfacing, I think was in 2016, 4 years ago. And the reason that I brought this forward was because looking at Fire Station 6, that has been needed for a long, long time, and we don't have the ability to do it. We also are looking at a legislative decision that would further even possibly reduce the revenue that the city has, and trying to figure out how to provide for our citizens. So something that Councilwoman Munchie said was the control versus obligation. And I really thought about that too, because we do have an obligation to protect our citizens, which is so important. So, and you know, one of the things that came to my mind as we were discussing earlier is that this actually gives our citizens a greater opportunity to determine their outcome. So we do lose control, and that's a little scary, but actually I thought, do we trust our citizens? Do we trust our citizens to make good decisions? And you know what? We need to, because they're the ones that live here. They're the ones that are going to elect somebody to guide this. And the good news is they're going to get to be focused on the fire safety for our community. And they're going to make a decision to do the increases or not. They're going to watch over that, and they're going to get to be very, very focused on that. And so I think you guys have made a good decision. And we've made the best decision we can. And you know, my job as mayor is to work with the team and to ensure that we unearth everything. You know, you turn every stone over and make sure you've given the correct information. And to the best of my knowledge, we've done that. We've fully intended to, because the last thing in the world I want is someone to say, well, who was mayor when you guys made that decision? And I know you guys are feeling the same with council, right? So who made that decision? You want it to be a good decision. And so I've said this so many times, I so appreciate this council and our ability to have these discussions and really flesh it out. So thank you. I have one last comment, and I was texting during this meeting, and I apologize, but I was trying to text with Amy because we put out a press release tonight, and that press release is that the city hall is going to be closed starting tomorrow. And we decided it, Doug, I haven't even gotten to tell you that yet, but it has to do with the number of COVID exposures we've got. We're going to end up closing our mayor's office. The clerk's office will be closed starting tomorrow. We don't have anyone that can be working in the office. So, and that's because of potential exposures and having to quarantine. And so, you know, you do the best you can, and we have tried so hard to be diligent and careful. But COVID is on the rise right now in a massive way. And we're trying to have no exposure within the city, but then you have someone come in that has a little bit of whatever and they think it's okay, and then they test positive or they have to go test. And we've had just a couple of those, and it's really, so starting tomorrow, City Hall doors will be locked. The entire mayor's office will be working from home. This entire city clerk's office will be working from home. I don't know, utility billing, we didn't put it out in the press release, Doug, but
Well, yeah,
we'll be talking about that.
Jamie just texted me, so I knew that that was up. We need to talk about utility billing. My recommendation is we strip everybody out there that we can, but there are several people who can't work remote and several people who are out of PL. So
they would like to be there and just keep it limited and keep it going. And you know what, that's been the goal, is to keep the city open. I don't want to have the doors closed. But unfortunately, we don't have people to man the offices right now. So we're going to have to do that. So anyway, we're doing what we can, and we look forward to getting through this season. That said, I think we need to have a motion for adjournment.
So move.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you,
Mayor,
team.
Thank you very much for your leadership.